Hi, welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. We have another great case to talk about today. Before I get to the case, don't forget to make sure you like us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, so you don't miss this or any of our other lives. In addition, don't forget to tune in tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be having a discussion on the changes to immigration enforcement. So if you've watched the news lately, you may have heard a lot of the Trump era policies have been reversed or they got rid of them. And there's a lot of information out there that's confusing. So myself and attorney Shapiro will be live tomorrow night to discuss some of those changes, what you can expect if you have a case in removal proceedings, if you already have a removal order, if you have a loved one in detention, things like that. So make sure that you tune in then and share it with anyone you think who will be interested. We were supposed to have Are You Smarter Than Naturalized Citizen, our game show, on Wednesday night this week. I'll make an announcement after this. If we are going to have it, it may be postponed for a little. So let's get to our case today. So our client is a native and citizen of Tajikistan. She first came to the U.S. in 2010 as an F1 student, and she remained a student for about 3 years. Then she stopped going to school. In 2014, she met her, who would then become her U.S. citizen husband, when she moved into the same building as him. And at first, everything was great. He's Jewish. She's Muslim, but that wasn't a problem. The families weren't particularly religious. And I'll mention that because I'll be coming back to this issue later on. And they got married and had a child. I think they actually, I'm not sure if the child was born before or after the wedding, but or she was pregnant before or after the wedding, I'm sorry. So they had a son together, and everything was going great. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this case today is because this case presents so many of the red flags that I talk about in my other videos about VAWA, domestic abuse. And it's a good example of how things can really escalate if you don't get out of the situation. Like unfortunately, this client could not for a while. So this is the first red flag. She gives birth, she had a C-section. They're at the hospital and her husband is telling her, or she gets released and her husband's like, you're not allowed to take your pain pills. She's like, I'm in a severe amount of pain, I need them. No, pills are bad for you, he told her. He wouldn't let her take them, and not only that, he threw them in the toilet so she couldn't take her pain pills, leaving her in excruciating pain. Now, I think it had to do with his belief regarding medication, because when she went to bring her son for vaccination, he was vehemently opposed to it. But regardless, anytime you're watching a family member suffer and taking away the thing to help them that is just prescribed by a doctor, that's a little iffy. But it should definitely raise a red flag no matter what. And then it started off verbal. He'd call her stupid, and she was nothing but a housewife. And then he kind of got more discriminatory because she's Muslim. He started becoming more religious himself, which I think really was one of the things that drove a wedge in between them. He also had a gambling addiction, which any type of addiction can escalate the abuse in a relationship tremendously. He tried to isolate her from her family and friends. Again, another red flag. But not only did he have a problem with the religion after the fact, in front of their son, he began calling her a terrorist and a killer because she was Muslim. And a turning point in her story came when her husband lost his job. He was working for an Orthodox Jewish person. It seemed like he took out on her that he lost the job because she was Muslim, even though it literally had nothing to do with it. And that's when he stopped coming home until really late at night. Another red flag. On weekends, not at all. Another red flag. He wouldn't talk to her when he was home, and she would ask him, like as many abuse survivors think, like will ask their abusers, what did I do? What did I do wrong? What can I do better? But the truth was she did nothing wrong. He was just an abusive person. And it was so bad that she actually became suicidal. And she even told him, and he didn't seem to really care that much. So what he told her was that when she would say, well, what can I do? He said, well, you can become Jewish. You can become more religious. He would go to classes every week, and he told her to come to them. So she went to one of these classes, and the entire class was about how every other religion was basically bad, and being except for that the Jewish religion. And I mean, I wasn't at this class. I don't know exactly what was said. I was just repeating what my client told me. That she basically said that she wasn't considered a human, and you're not allowed to marry outside of your religion, blah, blah, blah. So she was very distraught after this course and went up to the rabbi and said, hey, Rabbi, why, can you help me with my husband? He's acting different now that he's become more religious, and I don't know what to do. And the rabbi looked at her and said that you have a decision to make. You have 2 weeks to decide. Either you're going to divorce him or you're going to become an Orthodox Jew. Otherwise, he's going to go burn in hell for marrying a non-Jew. This was another thing that shocked her, but she said, okay, I will try to become an Orthodox Jew if that means keeping my family together. She again, as with many other abuse victims, they still love the abuser and want to have a family and think that something can change for the better. So she was going to do whatever it took. So she told him, look, I'll do it. So he bought her some books. He started teaching her about the religion, started making her follow the kosher rules, which is they're very, very strict if you don't know them. That's like the rules where you have to wear a skirt below your knees, and that's just one of the many rules for women and men. But it's for someone who doesn't practice that type of that sect of the religion, it seems very controlling. So after that happened, things got a lot worse. And when I say a lot worse, and this is after she agreed to try to become an Orthodox Jew, her husband turned from verbal abuse until physical abuse. He forced her to have sex with him and even videotaped it, even though she didn't want it. Again, he would lock her and the baby. He one time locked her in the room while the baby was crying for her, and he wouldn't let her see the baby. And then he would threaten to have the baby taken away because she's like, if you try to leave me, you don't have papers, I'm going to call the police and deport you. Again, these are all like word for word of things I've said in the past, that these types of threats are used for somebody like her who has no one else to depend on here. That's really, really scary, especially when you're like, I'm going to take your son away, you'll never see him again. So he also not just had the physical violence in private, but also in public. He smacked her in front of his family and the baby, which is all just really bad stuff. At one point, 2 times actually, but at one point things got so bad she called the police. And by the time he knew she called the police, so by the time the police got there, he locked her and the son in a room, and then greeted the police at the door, apologized for his wife calling, saying, oh, she's crazy, she's a drunk, she left, I don't even know what's going on. And at first the police were like, oh, okay, believed him, or so he thought, and they walked away. So she was let out of the room, and then the police came back. And when the police came back, because they get these calls all the time, they know that just because they show up and the person who's allegedly abusing someone says, oh, there's nothing going on here, the police know that how people get around it. So they came back, they saw the place was a mess because the husband had been throwing her stuff all around the apartment, telling her to get out, things like that. And when they saw that, they realized, and that she was home, they actually did arrest him. And of course, she was worried because he told her that because she called the police, he was going to make her life that much worse. And she ended up calling the police another time because he had punched her in the face, and we have photographs of that as well. And that time the police arrested him, and he was charged criminally, and she was given a final order of protection. So it's a lot of facts I just threw out in a short amount of time about an abusive situation. But basically, this case is very interesting because it involves different components of religions. I've talked about before on these videos what should a marriage look like? Does it matter if you're a different culture, a different religion? The answer is no, it doesn't matter. But there are times where there can be problems marrying outside your religion. But it's always individual, and it doesn't mean they didn't love each other. Her husband made a unilateral decision after they got married that he wanted to be more religious. So, how did the visa status turn out? We have a question. The visa, she's in the U.S., so she didn't need a visa, but the end result was her VAWA was granted about a year ago, and her green card was granted recently, like last week. So she now has a green card because it's based on her marriage to a U.S. citizen, even though it was through abuse. She is eligible in 3 years to become a naturalized U.S. citizen. So quickly, I'll just go over the types of evidence we used. And again, every case is different, it varies. I like to just talk about the evidence because it shows you how different. This one has a lot more of the typical evidence that it makes things a little easier, and I'll explain. Yes, it is great, and I've actually been trying to call her, and I don't know if she's watching even know this is her, but she's out of the country right now, actually. So she doesn't know yet, but I did email her, I scanned it, I'm really excited and can't wait to tell her. So for the good faith marriage evidence that we submitted, she wrote like a 8-page single typed affidavit that was really, really detailed. It was an affidavit where she showed it to me and I really didn't have to tell her to do anything else. It had everything we needed. It was all in her own words. It was great. And it covered also for the abuse evidence. We put in their son's birth certificate, a joint Con Ed bill, and then some photos from the wedding, first date, and affidavit from some friends. For the abuse evidence, same affidavits were used. The friends were witness to both, so they talked about both. She obviously talked about both in hers. The photograph, as I said, when he punched her. We had the 2 domestic incident reports, so the 2 police reports that for the 2 times she called the police, and then the final order of protection from the criminal court. So it was heavy on the abuse side with the evidence. I would say it was a stronger case, but and just because they have a son together, that's not the end of it. It's not like we didn't have to submit other proof, because that's just, people do have kids together that don't intend to spend the rest of their lives together. These 2 did until all the abuse started. So it was it did take a long time, not because we didn't get an RFE on this. Actually, the only RFE we got was to resubmit the medical exam, because back when we submitted this, you had to submit it and it expired. Otherwise, they didn't ask for anything. It still took about 3 years to get the green card, and we filed it all together. So yeah, like I said, really great case to look at when talking about red flags, talking about not being able to get out of a situation early on, talking about the types of evidence that we use, and then talking about how sometimes the difference in culture or difference in religion can end up being the downfall of a relationship, but that does not mean that your intentions at the beginning of the relationship were not to spend your lives together. And that's really what it comes down to. So that is all today for notable approvals. I will hopefully be back tomorrow, but definitely this week with another one. Check out tomorrow night, 9 p.m. We're going to be answering questions too, but it'll be primarily a discussion on the new immigration enforcement guidelines, what to expect with all of that. So get all the facts. Don't listen to the news and stuff. Listen to attorneys who know what they're talking about, which is us. Thank you for watching. Make sure that if you like what you're seeing, you share this, like us, follow us, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all that great stuff. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.